They called him the Ice King, and for good reason. His castle stood at the northernmost point of the territories, where winter never ended and the sun barely rose. Black ice coated the walls. Frost flowers bloomed in patterns that looked like screaming faces, and inside, ruling over a kingdom of perpetual cold, sat Kael Frostborne, the cursed king who couldn't feel warmth, couldn't feel emotion, and was slowly freezing to death from the inside out. Welcome back, my beautiful family. Before we get started, kindly subscribe, like, share, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Tonight's story is about sacrifice, survival, and a love that burned hot enough to melt even the coldest heart. This is a tale of a girl sold as an offering and the frozen king who would destroy kingdoms to keep her safe. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's begin this journey into the frozen north. Nyla Ashwood stood in the center of her pack's gathering hall, wrists bound, head high, and heart hammering with a terror she refused to show. "The tribute has been decided," Alpha Brennan announced, his voice carrying across the assembled pack. Her pack. The wolves who'd raised her, who'd once called her family, who were now selling her to save themselves. Nyla Ashwood will be sent to the Ice King as this decade's bride. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some looked relieved, better her than their daughters. Others looked pitying, which was somehow worse. A few looked guilty, but not guilty enough to speak up. "No!" Her younger brother Finn pushed through the crowd, his 16-year-old face desperate. "She's not even trained. She's barely shifted. You can't send her to die." "The Ice King demands a bride every 10 years, Brennan said coldly. "It's been the law since the curse began 30 years ago. If we don't send someone, his winter spreads into our territory. Crops fail, children freeze. Would you prefer that? Send someone else, someone who volunteered." "No one volunteers to die, boy." Brennan's eyes were hard. "And your sister is expendable. No mate, no special skills. She's done nothing of value for this pack. At least in death, she can serve a purpose." Nyla's hands clenched into fists. Expendable. Was that truly what they thought of her? She'd worked the healing wards, helped with the children, done everything asked of her. But she wasn't a warrior, wasn't beautiful, wasn't politically connected, just ordinary, forgettable, expendable. "When do I leave?" Nyla asked quietly, cutting through Finn's continued protests. Brennan looked almost surprised she'd spoken. "Dawn. The Ice King's envoys will arrive to escort you north. You'll be given 3 days to reach the Frostspire castle. Anything you wish to take with you should be packed tonight. And if I refuse, then your brother will go in your place." Brennan's smile was cruel. "Your choice, Nyla. Die yourself or let him freeze." Finn went white. Nyla's heart cracked. They'd backed her into a corner perfectly. She'd walked to her death to save him, and they knew it. "I'll go," Nyla said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "I'll be ready at dawn." That night, Finn helped her pack the small bag she'd be allowed to take. Warm clothes, a few personal items, a journal their mother had left before she died. Not much to show for 23 years of life. "You don't have to do this," Finn whispered, tears streaming down his face. "We could run, leave the pack, find somewhere else. And live as rogues? You're 16, Finn. You'd never survive." Nyla cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Listen to me. I need you to live, to grow strong, to be better than Alpha Brennan and his cronies who throw away pack members like trash. Promise me you'll survive. Promise me you'll make this pack better when you're old enough to challenge for leadership. Nyla, promise me." "I promise," Finn choked out. "But I'll find a way to save you. I swear it. Even if it takes years, Finn." Nyla pulled him into a hug. "If I'm going to die, I need to know you'll be okay. That's the only thing that makes this bearable. Don't waste your life trying to save someone who's already gone. Live, be happy. That's how you honor me." They held each other until dawn broke cold and gray over the horizon. The Ice King's envoys arrived exactly as promised. 3 figures wrapped in furs so thick Nyla couldn't see their faces. They didn't speak, didn't acknowledge the pack, just gestured for Nyla to follow. She did, not looking back. If she looked back at Finn's devastated face, she'd break. And she refused to give Brennan the satisfaction of seeing her cry. The journey north took 3 days, just as predicted. With each mile, the temperature dropped. By the second day, Nyla's breath frosted in the air constantly. By the third, ice clung to her eyelashes and the trees around them were skeletal and dead, stripped by cold that never ended. And then she saw it. Frostspire Castle rose from the frozen wasteland like something from a nightmare. Black stone and white ice twisted together into spiraling towers that seemed to pierce the sky. Blue flames, cold fire that gave off no heat, burned in iron braziers along the walls, and everywhere, ice, coating everything, preserving everything in crystalline stasis. It was beautiful in the way a tomb was beautiful. Perfect, pristine, dead. The envoys led her through massive gates that opened soundlessly, through courtyards where ice sculptures of wolves stood frozen mid-howl, up staircases where frost patterns crawled across the walls like living things. They stopped before a set of double doors carved with images of wolves locked in ice. One of the envoys finally spoke, their voice muffled by the furs. "Beyond this door is the throne room. The Ice King will receive you now. Do not look directly at him unless he commands it. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not touch anything. The cold in that room will kill you within hours if you're not careful." "How comforting," Nyla muttered. The envoy's head tilted slightly. "No bride has survived past the first night in 30 years. We do not expect you to break that pattern, but he requires the ritual be followed. You will be presented, you will be claimed, and you will die as the curse demands. We are sorry." The last word sounded genuine. Nyla found that somehow more terrifying than if they'd been cruel. The doors swung open, and cold hit her like a physical wall. Nyla forced herself to walk forward into a throne room that looked carved from a single glacier. Ice pillars stretched to a ceiling lost in frozen mist. The floor was black stone veined with blue that glowed faintly. And at the far end, on a throne of crystallized ice that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, sat the Ice King. He was younger than Nyla expected, couldn't be more than 30. Tall, powerfully built, with white blonde hair that fell past his shoulders and skin so pale it almost matched the ice around him. His eyes were the same glacial blue as the cold flames burning throughout the castle, beautiful and absolutely devoid of warmth. He wore armor made of ice that didn't melt, black furs draped across his shoulders, and his expression was completely, utterly blank. Not cruel, not kind, just empty, like looking at a statue pretending to be human. "Approach," the Ice King said, his voice echoing strangely in the frozen chamber. Nyla walked forward, her footsteps too loud, her breath fogging in clouds. She stopped at the base of the throne steps and did something that surprised even herself. She didn't bow, didn't kneel, just looked up at him with her chin raised and met his eyes directly. The Ice King's expression flickered, the first emotion she'd seen. Surprise, then something that might have been curiosity. "You don't follow instructions well," he observed. "I was told I'm going to die anyway. Seemed pointless to waste time being obedient to someone who plans to kill me." More surprise. "You're not afraid?" "I'm terrified," Nyla corrected. "But I've spent 3 days walking to my death. I'm tired of fear. So if you're going to kill me, at least let me die on my feet with some dignity." The Ice King stood slowly, descending the steps with movements that were too graceful, too precise, like a predator or a dancer. He stopped 2 feet from her, towering over her smaller frame, and studied her with those unnervingly empty eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nyla Ashwood." "Why did your pack send you, Nyla Ashwood?" "Because I'm expendable. No special skills, no political value, easy to sacrifice." She smiled bitterly. "I'm guessing that's why all the brides are sent. Your curse requires a death, so packs send the ones they won't miss." Something flickered across his face again. Anger? Pain? It was gone too quickly to tell. "The curse doesn't require death," the Ice King said quietly. "It requires warmth. Specifically, the warmth of a living heart close enough to mine that my frozen blood might remember what heat feels like. But every bride who's been sent, they freeze. Too fragile, too afraid. They die before the ritual can even begin." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingertips touched her cheek. Nyla gasped. His touch was cold, so cold it burned, like pressing her face into snow. But underneath the cold, she felt something else. A flutter, like a heartbeat trying to remember its rhythm. "You're different," the Ice King. "Kael," she reminded herself. His name was Kael, murmured. "You're still warm. The cold hasn't taken you yet." "How long does it usually take?" "Minutes. Most brides start freezing the moment they enter this room, but you've been here for nearly 10 minutes and your skin is still warm to touch." His hand dropped. "Interesting. So I'm not dying immediately." "Great. When should I expect it?" "Honestly, I don't know." Kael turned away, walking back toward his throne. "The curse is unpredictable. Some brides lasted hours. One made it to dawn, but all of them froze eventually. Their hearts stopped. The warmth left them, and the curse remained. What exactly is this curse? Nyla asked, because if she was going to die here, she at least wanted to understand why. Why does the Ice King need a bride every decade? What started this? Kael was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, 30 years ago, I made a mistake. I was young, arrogant, newly crowned. A witch came to my castle seeking asylum. She'd been cast out by her coven, was injured, needed help. I turned her away, sent her back into the winter storm, because I didn't want to deal with her problems. He touched his chest, where his heart would be. She cursed me before she died. Said I had no warmth in my heart, so I'd never feel warmth again, that I'd freeze slowly from the inside out, that the only way to break the curse was to find someone whose warmth could reach my frozen heart. But until then, the curse spreads. My kingdom grows colder. The winter extends into neighboring territories, and every 10 years, I'm required to take a bride, an offering from the pacts that border my land, to try to break the curse, to fail, to watch another innocent die because of my cruelty. He looked at her, and for the first time, Nyla saw something in those glacial eyes. Guilt, exhaustion, self-loathing so deep it had worn grooves into his soul. So you see, Kael said quietly, you're not being sacrificed to a monster. You're being sacrificed to a foolish boy who made a mistake 30 years ago and has been paying for it ever since, along with everyone else. Nyla processed this. How many brides? You are the fourth. And they all died? Yes. Because they froze too quickly? Yes. But I haven't frozen yet. No. Kael's eyes studied her with something that might have been hope. No, you haven't, which means there's a chance, small, but a chance that you might be different, that you might be able to withstand the cold long enough for the ritual to work. And if it works, if I somehow manage to break your curse, then the winter ends, the cold recedes, my kingdom thaws, and you, he hesitated, you would be free to leave, to return home, to live whatever life you chose. I wouldn't keep you here against your will. Nyla laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Funny, I don't have a home to return to. The pact that sent me here made it clear I'm expendable. My brother is the only one who'd welcome me back, and I can't put him in danger by returning. She looked around the frozen throne room, at the cold flames and ice pillars, and the king who couldn't feel warmth. And she made a decision. So here's my counter-offer, Nyla said. I'll try your ritual. I'll try to break your curse. Not because I want to save my pack. They can freeze for all I care. But because you seem like you've suffered enough for one stupid mistake made by a scared boy. And because spite is a powerful motivator, and I'd really like to prove Alpha Brennan wrong about me being worthless. Kael stared at her. You're agreeing to this, knowing you'll probably die? I was going to die anyway. At least this way there's a chance it means something. Nyla shrugged. Besides, you said it yourself. I'm different. I haven't frozen yet. Maybe I'm stubborn enough to survive out of pure spite. For the first time since she'd entered the throne room, Kael Frostborne smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was genuine. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, he said, or the most foolish. Probably both. Nyla held out her hand. So, Ice King, how do we break a curse? Kael looked at her outstretched hand, warm, alive, offered freely. Then, slowly, he took it. The moment their palms touched, something shifted. The cold flames flickered. The ice groaned. And somewhere deep in Kael's chest, something that had been frozen for 30 years pulsed once with heat. Not much, not enough to break the curse, but it was a start. The ritual, as it turned out, was surprisingly simple in concept and terrifying in execution. Nyla had to spend every night for the next 7 days in Kael's chambers, close enough that her warmth, her living heartbeat, her breath, her presence might slowly thaw the ice that had claimed his heart. If she survived all 7 nights, the curse would break. If she died before then, the curse remained, and Kael would have to wait another decade for the next bride. Most don't make it past the first night, Kael warned as he led her through the castle to his personal chambers. The cold in my rooms is concentrated, stronger. It's where the curse is most powerful. Comforting, Nyla muttered, pulling her cloak tighter. They stopped before an ornate door covered in frost patterns. Kael hesitated before opening it. If at any point you feel too cold, if your fingers start to blacken, if you can't feel your limbs, if your heartbeat slows, you tell me immediately. I'll move you to a warmer room. The curse isn't worth your life. You've said that about the last 3 brides? Yes. And they all died anyway? Yes. Then stop being gentle about it. I know what I agreed to. Nyla met his eyes. Open the door, Ice King. Let's see if I'm stubborn enough to survive. Kael opened the door. The cold that poured out was immediate and absolute. Nyla's breath froze mid-exhale. Her skin burned with the ice in the air. Her lungs ached with each inhale, but she didn't freeze, didn't collapse, just gritted her teeth and walked inside. The chamber was massive. A bed large enough for 5 people dominated one side, covered in furs that looked preserved rather than warm. A fireplace stood empty. No point in fires that would just freeze. Windows of actual glass, not ice, overlooked the frozen wasteland outside. And everywhere, cold, seeping from the walls, rising from the floor, pressing down from the ceiling. The bed has the most furs, Kael said, his voice carefully neutral. You'll sleep there. I'll stay in the chair by the window, close enough for the ritual, far enough to give you space. Where do you normally sleep? I don't. Haven't slept in 30 years. The curse doesn't allow it. Nyla stopped mid-step. You haven't slept in 3 decades? The cold keeps me awake. Always. I rest sometimes, but never sleep, never dream, never... He trailed off. It's fine. You get used to it. That's not fine. That's torture. Kael didn't answer. Just moved to the chair by the window and sat, his posture perfectly straight, his expression empty again. Nyla looked at the massive bed piled with furs, then at the Ice King sitting alone by the window, cursed to never sleep, never feel, never truly live. And she made another decision that would probably get her killed. No, she said firmly. Kael looked up, surprised. No? No, you're not sitting in a chair while I take the bed. The whole point of this ritual is my warmth reaching your frozen heart, right? That's not going to work if you're 10 feet away. She pointed to the bed. We both sleep there. Or rest there, in your case, close enough for the ritual to actually work. Nyla, that's not... I can't... The cold will kill me whether you're in a chair or in the bed. She started pulling back the furs. At least this way, we give the ritual an actual chance instead of half-assing it because you're trying to be noble. This isn't nobility. I'm trying to keep you alive. And I'm trying to break your curse, which is more important, your comfort or potentially saving your entire kingdom. Nyla climbed into the bed, immediately grateful for the layers of furs. Get in the bed, Ice King. That's an order. Kael stared at her for a long moment. Then, moving like a man walking to his execution, he approached the bed and lay down on top of the furs, maintaining a careful foot of space between them. Closer, Nyla said. Nyla. The last 3 brides died because the cold got them before the warmth could reach you. We're not making that mistake. She shifted closer, closing the gap until they were inches apart. There. Now your frozen heart has an actual chance of feeling my warmth instead of just my cold corpse tomorrow morning. You're insane, Kael breathed. Probably. Nyla pulled the furs up to her chin. Now stop talking. I'm exhausted and freezing, and if I'm going to die tonight, I'd like to spend my last hours sleeping, not arguing with a cursed king about proper bedtime etiquette. Silence fell. Nyla closed her eyes, trying to ignore the cold seeping through the furs, trying to ignore the fact that she was lying in bed with the Ice King, trying to ignore the very real possibility she wouldn't wake up. Then she felt it. A shift in the air, the cold around her lessening, not warming, but not as brutal. As if the curse itself was confused by her proximity, unsure how to freeze something that refused to fear it. You're still warm? Kael whispered in the darkness. Told you, spite is a powerful motivator. This is the longest any bride has maintained their warmth. How long? 2 hours? Then I guess we have 5 more to go until sunrise. Nyla cracked one eye open. Think I'll make it? Kael looked at her, and in the dim light, she saw something in his glacial eyes she hadn't seen before. Not hope exactly, but maybe the memory of what hope felt like. I don't know, he admitted, but I'm starting to think you might be stubborn enough to prove everyone wrong. Good, Nyla closed her eyes again. Because I've got a lot of people to spite, and dying on the first night would really ruin my revenge plans. Despite everything, the cold, the fear, the very real possibility of death, Nyla smiled, and in the darkness of the Ice King's chamber, Kael Frostborne felt something he hadn't felt in 30 years. Warmth, tiny, fragile, But there, a single spark trying to kindle in the frozen wasteland of his chest. Nyla Ashwood wasn't just surviving the cold, she was beginning to melt it. Nyla woke to sunlight, weak and gray, but sunlight nonetheless, streaming through the windows. She was alive. For a moment, she just lay there, marveling at the fact that her heart was still beating. Her fingers still moved, her breath still fogged in the frigid air. Then she realized she wasn't cold anymore. Well, she was cold. The room was still freezing, but it wasn't the bone-deep killing cold from last night. It was more like winter morning cold, uncomfortable but survivable. She turned her head and found Kael still beside her, his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. "You're awake," he said quietly. "You say that like you're surprised." "I am." The first bride froze in her sleep. The second woke once, screaming, then died an hour later. The third lasted until midnight. His glacial eyes shifted to meet hers. "You made it to dawn. That's unprecedented." "Told you, spite is a powerful motivator." Nyla sat up slowly, testing her limbs. Everything worked. Everything was warm, relatively speaking. "So what happens now?" "Now we see if you can survive 6 more nights." "That's it? I just keep sleeping near you?" "The ritual requires proximity, sustained proximity. Your warmth needs to reach my heart consistently, not just in bursts. Each night, the cold will try harder to claim you. Each night, the curse will fight back." Kael sat up as well, and Nyla noticed something. The ice that had coated his hair last night was gone. His skin, while still pale, had a faint flush to it, and his eyes, those glacial blue eyes, seemed slightly less empty, like something behind them was beginning to thaw. "You look different," Nyla said. Kael touched his face, as if surprised. "The warmth is affecting me, slowly. I can almost feel it, like pins and needles, like limbs waking up after being numb." "Is that good or bad?" "I don't know. It's been 30 years since I've felt anything. It's overwhelming and terrifying," and he trailed off, then looked at her with something that might have been wonder. "You're really doing it. You're actually reaching the curse." Before Nyla could respond, a knock sounded at the door. "Your Majesty," a muffled voice called. "The morning council is waiting." Kael's expression hardened back into that blank mask. "I'll be there shortly." He stood, moving with that same predator grace. "You should rest, eat. The servants will bring you whatever you need. Tonight, we try again." "Wait," Nyla scrambled out of bed. "What do I do all day? Just sit in this room?" "The castle is yours to explore. Just stay away from the northern tower. The cold there is strongest, and I can't guarantee your safety. And avoid the lower dungeons. They're sealed for a reason." "Ominous." "I love it," Nyla grinned despite the situation. "Any other dire warnings before you go attend to kingly duties?" Kael paused at the door, then looked back at her. "Don't die, Nyla Ashwood. You're the first person in 30 years who's made me feel like maybe, just maybe, there's a chance this curse can be broken." Then he was gone, leaving Nyla alone in the frozen chamber with 6 more nights ahead of her, and a growing suspicion that breaking the Ice King's curse was going to be far more complicated than just surviving the cold. The castle, as Nyla discovered over the following days, was a study in contradictions, beautiful and terrifying, empty and full of whispers, frozen in time but somehow still alive with a presence she couldn't quite name. The servants were kind but distant, moving through the halls like ghosts. They brought her food, answered her questions with careful politeness, and never quite met her eyes, as if they were afraid to get attached to someone who'd probably be dead by week's end. Nyla explored anyway, found libraries filled with books frozen mid-read, ballrooms where ice sculptures of dancers stood eternally still, gardens where frost flowers bloomed in patterns that hurt to look at too long, and everywhere the evidence of the curse, the cold that never ended, the winter that consumed everything, the slow death creeping through Kael's kingdom while he sat on his throne, frozen and helpless to stop it. Each night, Nyla returned to his chambers. Each night, she climbed into the massive bed and waited for him to join her. Each night, they lay in the darkness, her warmth fighting against his cold, the ritual slowly, so slowly, beginning to work. By the 3rd night, Kael's skin was no longer deathly pale. By the 4th, the ice that usually coated the walls had started to thin. By the 5th, Nyla could swear she heard his heartbeat, faint but there. But the curse was fighting back. The cold grew more vicious, more targeted. Nyla woke on the 6th morning with frost clinging to her hair and her fingers tinged blue. Kael had moved her to the fireplace immediately, building a fire with wood that actually burned instead of freezing and stayed with her until color returned to her skin. "One more night," he said quietly, his hand wrapped around hers, his touch no longer burning cold but merely cool. "One more night and the ritual is complete. Can you make it?" Nyla looked at him, really looked. At the king who'd been alone for 30 years, at the man who'd watched 3 women die trying to save him, at the person underneath the curse who was so desperate to feel something, anything, that he'd subjected himself to this torture every decade just for a chance. "I've made it this far out of spite," she said. "I can make it one more night out of stubbornness." Kael's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're remarkable, Nyla Ashwood. Tell me that again when I'm not hallucinating about warm beaches and sunny meadows." That night, the 7th night, felt different. The cold was waiting. Nyla could feel it the moment she entered Kael's chambers. Not just cold, but malevolent, angry. The curse knew it was losing, and it was furious. "Maybe we should wait," Kael said, his expression tense. "The cold is too strong tonight. I can feel it. It's going to come for you harder than ever." "Then it's going to be disappointed when I survive anyway." Nyla climbed into the bed, pulling the furs around her. "Get in, Ice King. Let's finish what we started." Kael hesitated, then joined her, but this time he didn't maintain distance. This time he pulled her close as propriety allowed, his arms around her, his body a shield against the curse. "If you die tonight," he said quietly into her hair, "I'm never forgiving myself." "Then don't let me die." Nyla's hands found his chest, pressing against where his heart beat, stronger now, warmer, almost human. "Your heart is almost thawed, Kael. I can feel it. One more night. We just have to survive one more night. Together? Together." The cold attacked at midnight. Nyla felt it like knives, ice crawling through her veins, freezing her blood, stopping her heart. She gasped, her body convulsing, frost spreading across her skin. Kael's arms tightened. No, you don't get to take her." He was talking to the curse, fighting it, and Nyla felt something incredible. Heat, real, genuine heat pouring from Kael's body as his thawing heart fought back against the curse that had claimed him. The cold and warmth warred inside her, ice and fire, death and life. And slowly, painfully, the warmth won. The frost receded, her heart restarted, her breath came in ragged gasps, and in Kael's chest something cracked, not broke, cracked, like ice splitting under pressure, like a frozen lake beginning to thaw. Light exploded from Kael's chest, white and blue and brilliant. It filled the chamber, filled the castle, spread out across the frozen kingdom in waves of heat and life. The curse shattered. Nyla felt it break, felt the cold retreat, felt warmth, real warmth, flood through the castle for the first time in 30 years. And Kael Frostborne, the Ice King who hadn't felt anything in 3 decades, gasped as emotion crashed through him like a tidal wave. He was crying, actually crying. Tears streaming down his face as he held Nyla like she was the only real thing in the world. "It's gone," he choked out. "The cold is gone. I can feel, oh gods, I can feel everything. Your warmth, your heartbeat. I can feel my own heartbeat." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes no longer glacial blue but warm, alive, human, wide with wonder. "You did it. You actually did it." Nyla, exhausted and overwhelmed, managed a weak smile. "Told you, spite is a powerful..." She didn't finish. Kael kissed her, not a chaste, grateful kiss, a desperate, drowning kiss, like a man who'd been frozen for 30 years and was finally warm, like she was air and he'd been suffocating. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "Sorry," Kael said quickly. "I shouldn't have. I just..." "Shut up and do it again," Nyla demanded. So he did. And outside the chamber windows, the first spring in 30 years began to dawn over the Ice King's thawing kingdom. The change was immediate and dramatic. Within hours, the ice coating the castle walls began to melt. Within a day, the cold fires went out, no longer needed when actual warmth returned. Within a week, the first green shoots appeared in the gardens. The servants wept with joy. The people celebrated. And Kael walked through his defrosting kingdom with Nyla at his side, marveling at every sensation he'd forgotten, the warmth of sunlight, the smell of rain, the feeling of grass under his bare feet. "I'd forgotten," he said one afternoon as they stood in the garden watching flowers bloom. "Forgotten what it felt like to be alive instead of just existing." "You're welcome," Nyla said, but her smile was soft. Kael turned to her, his expression serious. "You know you're free to leave now. The curse is broken. The ritual is complete. I promised you could go home if you survived." About that. Nyla plucked a newly bloomed flower, twirling it between her fingers. Remember when I said I didn't have a home to go back to? That's still true. My pack made it clear I'm expendable. And Finn, as much as I love him, is safer if I stay away. Alpha Brennan would use me against him. She looked up at Kael. So I was thinking, this castle is pretty big, lots of empty rooms, needs someone to manage the gardens now that things are growing again, and you could probably use someone around who's not afraid to tell you when you're being stupid. Kael's breath caught. You want to stay? I want to stay. If you'll have me. Nyla stepped closer. I didn't just break your curse, Kael. I found something here, something I didn't have with my pack. Purpose, value, someone who sees me as more than expendable. You were never expendable, Kael said fiercely. You're extraordinary, brave, stubborn, remarkable. You saved my kingdom, saved me. How could you ever think? Because for 23 years, that's what I was told. Nyla touched his face. But you made me believe I was worth something, worth saving, worth fighting for, and I'm not ready to give that up. Kael's hand covered hers, pressing it against his cheek. Then stay. Not as a guest, not as someone who broke a curse, but as someone who belongs here, who has a home here, who... He hesitated, then continued, who I'm falling in love with. Nyla's breath caught. You barely know me. I know you're brave enough to walk into death without flinching. I know you're stubborn enough to survive 7 nights of a curse that killed everyone else. I know you looked at a frozen king and saw someone worth saving. His eyes, those warm, alive eyes, held hers, and I know that every moment since you've been here, I felt more alive than I did in 30 years of existing. That's not nothing, Nyla. No, she agreed softly. That's not nothing. So stay. Help me rebuild this kingdom. Help me remember what it means to be human instead of a curse. And let me prove to you every single day that you were never expendable. You were essential. Nyla kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When she pulled back, she was smiling. Okay, Ice King, I'll stay, but I have conditions. Name them. First, my brother Finn gets to visit. I need to know he's safe and let him see I'm alive. Second, we establish trade routes with neighboring territories. I want this kingdom to thrive, not just survive. Third, she grinned, you teach me to dance, because I saw that frozen ballroom and it deserves to host actual parties again. Kael laughed, actually laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. Done, all of it. Anything else? Yeah, stop calling yourself the Ice King. That curse is broken. You're just Kael now. A king who happens to rule the north, but not frozen, not cursed. Just you, just me, Kael repeated, as if testing the words. Then he smiled, full and bright and warm. I think I can live with that. 3 months later, the castle hosted its first ball in 30 years. The ballroom that had been frozen was now alive with music, laughter, and dancing. Representatives from all 5 kingdoms attended, curious to see the Ice King who was no longer frozen, the bride who'd survived, and the kingdom that had thawed. Nyla wore a gown the color of spring flowers, green and gold and alive. Kael wore formal attire but refused to wear furs. Never again, he'd said. I've been cold enough for 3 lifetimes. They danced together in front of the assembled nobility, and Nyla caught whispered conversations. That's her? The 4th bride? She broke the curse, saved the entire kingdom. They say she did it out of spite. I heard she survived because she was too stubborn to die. Nyla smiled. Let them whisper. She knew the truth. She'd survived because she'd found something worth surviving for. You're enjoying this, Kael murmured as he spun her. Immensely. Do you know how satisfying it is to prove everyone wrong? I can imagine. He pulled her closer. Though I should warn you, there's someone here who's been asking to see you. Nyla's heart clenched. Finn? And Alpha Brennan. Apparently your old pack heard about the curse breaking and wants to renegotiate relations. Fury sparked in Nyla's chest. They want to renegotiate now that I'm valuable, now that I'm standing beside a king instead of dead in a frozen room. Essentially, yes. Kael's expression hardened. Would you like me to have them removed? No. Nyla's voice was cold as the castle used to be. I'll handle it, but not tonight. Tonight is for celebrating. They can wait until morning to discover exactly how expendable they are to me now. Kael's smile was sharp. Remind me never to make you angry. Too late. You already saw me at my angriest. I survived 7 nights out of pure spite directed at my pack for calling me worthless. And I'm very grateful for that spite. The music ended. Kael and Nyla bowed to each other formally, but the warmth in their eyes was anything but formal. As the evening continued, Nyla finally spotted Finn in the crowd. He looked older, more mature, more confident, and when their eyes met, his face crumbled with relief. He pushed through the crowd and Nyla met him halfway. They collided in a hug that made her ribs ache. "You're alive," Finn choked out. "They said you broke the curse. They said you survived, but I had to see it for myself, had to know you were really okay." "I'm okay," Nyla promised. "More than okay. I'm happy, Finn. Actually happy." He pulled back, studying her face. "You are. I can see it." Then his expression hardened. "Alpha Brennan wants to see you, wants to apologize, wants to bring you home." "I know, and tomorrow I'll tell him exactly where he can shove his apology." Nyla squeezed his hands. "But right now, I want you to tell me everything. How are you? Is the pack treating you well? Are you safe?" They talked for hours, tucked away in a quieter corner. Finn told her about the pack, how Alpha Brennan had grown more paranoid since the curse broke, how others were questioning his leadership, how Finn himself was training to challenge for Alpha position in a few years. "I'm going to make it better," Finn said fiercely. "The way you told me to. No more sacrificing pack members. No more calling anyone expendable. Everyone will have value. I swear it." "I believe you," Nyla said softly. "And when you do become Alpha, you'll have an alliance with the North. Kael and I will support you." "Kael?" Finn's eyebrows rose. "You're on a first-name basis with the formerly cursed Ice King?" "Shut up," Nyla said, but she was smiling. "You love him." "Maybe. Definitely." Finn grinned. "Good. You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are, someone who doesn't think you're expendable." "You never thought I was expendable?" "No, but I was 16 and powerless. Now I'm 18 and training to take over a pack. Things are different." He hugged her again. "I'm so proud of you, Nyla. You survived when everyone expected you to die, and you didn't just survive, you thrived." The next morning, Nyla met with Alpha Brennan in the castle's formal receiving room. He looked smaller than she remembered, older, weaker, standing in the thawed castle of a king he'd tried to sacrifice her to, suddenly realizing his expendable offering was now far more powerful than he'd ever be. "Nyla," he began, his tone oozing false warmth, "it's wonderful to see you alive and well. When we sent you here, we feared the worst, but—" "Stop!" Nyla's voice was cold and sharp. "You sent me here to die. You called me expendable. You told me I had no value to the pack, and you used my brother as leverage to force my compliance." Brennan's smile faltered. "We did what was necessary. You sacrificed me because it was easier than sending someone you actually cared about." Nyla stood, drawing herself to her full height. She was still shorter than him, but somehow she felt larger, stronger. "And now that I've survived, now that I'm standing beside a king, now that I'm valuable, suddenly you want to renegotiate relations. Suddenly you want to apologize. The pack needs allies. The pack should have thought of that before throwing away a member who could have been one." Nyla stepped closer, and Brennan actually stepped back. "Here's what's going to happen. Finn will continue training. When he challenges you for Alpha position, and he will, you will step down gracefully. And under his leadership, your pack will enter into a treaty with the North, but that treaty will be negotiated by Finn, not you, because you don't get to benefit from the person you tried to kill. You can't dictate pack politics. I can when I'm standing beside a king whose territory borders yours, when I'm the one who broke a curse that could have spread winter into your lands, when I'm the one who decides whether the North offers you trade routes or watches you starve." Nyla's smile was sharp. "You taught me I was expendable, Alpha Brennan. Now let me teach you what expendable really means. You are dismissed." Brennan's face went red with rage. "You ungrateful—" "Careful." Kael's voice cut through the room like ice. He'd been standing in the doorway, silent until now. "You're speaking to my mate. Insult her and you insult me. And I've spent 30 years frozen and miserable. I'm feeling remarkably warm these days, but I can still make your territory very, very cold if necessary." Brennan paled. "Your mate?" "Yes." Kael moved to stand beside Nyla, his hand resting on her shoulder. "We're bonding at the next full moon, which means Nyla Ashwood will be Queen of the North, and you will show her the respect that position demands, or you'll find out exactly how creative I can be with ice magic now that I can control it instead of being controlled by it." After Brennan left, pale and shaking, Kael turned to Nyla with a raised eyebrow. "Mate, Queen, were you planning to tell me about this, or was I supposed to figure it out?" Nyla grinned. "You said you were falling in love with me. I assumed that meant you'd want to make it official eventually." "Eventually, yes. But Queen, that's..." He paused. "Actually, that's perfect. You've already been acting like a queen, reorganizing the gardens, establishing trade routes, telling me when I'm being stupid. Might as well make it official." "Was that a proposal?" "That was a terrible proposal. Let me try again." Kael dropped to one knee, taking her hand. "Nyla Ashwood, you broke my curse, saved my kingdom, and taught me what it means to feel alive again. You're brave, stubborn, brilliant, and entirely too good at proving people wrong. Would you do me the honor of becoming my mate, my queen, and my partner in rebuilding a kingdom that's finally warm enough for flowers to grow?" Nyla pretended to consider. "Will I get to tell you when you're being stupid? Frequently and enthusiastically. Will I have authority over the gardens?" "Absolute authority." "And can Finn visit whenever he wants?" "He can have his own rooms in the castle." "Then yes, Ice King. Sorry, just Kael. Yes, I'll marry you." Kael stood, swept her into his arms, and kissed her thoroughly. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "You know," Nyla said thoughtfully, "if someone had told me 3 months ago that I'd be here, alive, happy, engaged to a formerly cursed king, I'd have thought they were insane. If someone had told me 3 months ago that a stubborn Omega would survive my curse through pure spite and then reorganize my entire castle, I'd have thought the same." Kael tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "But I'm very glad we were both wrong." "Me too." The bonding ceremony took place under the first full moon of summer. The castle was decorated with flowers, real flowers, growing in soil instead of frozen in ice. The ballroom was filled with guests from all 5 kingdoms. And at the center of it all, Nyla and Kael stood before Elder Tomas, who'd traveled from the Oakwood Pact to perform the ceremony. "We gather to witness something extraordinary," Tomas announced. "The bonding of a king who was cursed to freeze, and the Omega who thawed his frozen heart. This is not a union of politics or alliance. This is a union of 2 souls who found each other in the coldest, darkest place and chose warmth, chose life, chose love." He turned to Kael. "Do you, Kael Frostborne, King of the North, take Nyla Ashwood as your mate, your equal, your partner in all things?" "I do," Kael said clearly, "for as long as my heart beats, and it beats because of her." Tomas turned to Nyla. "Do you, Nyla Ashwood, take Kael Frostborne as your mate, your equal, your partner in all things?" "I do," Nyla said, "for as long as my stubborn spite keeps us both alive." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Kael grinned. "Then, by the power of the moon goddess and the witness of these gathered, I declare you bonded. May your love thaw every frozen heart, and may your union bring warmth to all who know you." Kael and Nyla kissed, and the crowd erupted in cheers. But the loudest cheer came from Finn, standing in the front row with tears streaming down his face. Later, during the celebration, Nyla found a moment alone with her brother. "You're happy," Finn said. Not a question, an observation. "I am. Happier than I've ever been." Nyla squeezed his hand. "Thank you for letting me go, for not trying to stop me that morning. I knew if anyone could survive the Ice King's curse, it would be you. You're too stubborn to die." Finn smiled through his tears. "And I was right." "You usually are." Nyla pulled him into a hug. "Be safe, little brother. Train hard, and when you challenge Brennan, know that I'll be there. The Queen of the North, backing her brother's claim to Alpha." "The Queen of the North," Finn repeated, shaking his head in wonder. "Who would have thought?" "Not Alpha Brennan, that's for sure." They laughed together, and in that moment, Nyla realized something. She'd been sent north to die, sent as a sacrifice to a cursed king in a frozen castle. But she hadn't died. She'd lived. She'd thrived. She'd found love in the coldest place. She'd broken an unbreakable curse. She'd proven everyone who called her expendable catastrophically wrong. And now she stood as queen of a thawing kingdom, with a mate who loved her and a future that was warm and bright and full of possibilities she'd never imagined. "Nyla?" Kael's voice pulled her from her thoughts. He stood in the doorway, one hand extended. "They're asking for the first dance. Are you ready?" Nyla took his hand, letting him pull her close. "I'm ready." They walked back into the ballroom together, and Nyla caught sight of their reflection in one of the massive windows. A king and queen, standing side by side, equal in power and partnership. She looked good in a crown. 5 years later, the North had transformed completely. The eternal winter was a memory. The castle gardens bloomed year-round, maintained by Nyla herself. Trade routes connected the North to all 5 kingdoms, and the people, once frozen and desperate, now thrived under the rule of a king who'd learned compassion and a queen who'd learned her own worth. Nyla stood in that same garden where she'd first told Kael she wanted to stay, watching their 3-year-old daughter chase butterflies with Finn's children. Their son, barely 1, dozed in Kael's arms while his father told him stories about the curse that had once ruled this land. "She has your stubbornness," Kael observed as their daughter ignored all instructions to come inside for lunch. "And your complete disregard for authority," Nyla countered. "Fair." They stood in comfortable silence, watching their children play in a garden that shouldn't exist, in a kingdom that should still be frozen, in a life that should never have been possible. "Do you ever think about it?" Kael asked quietly. "That morning when your pack sent you here to die, about how different things could have been?" "Sometimes." Nyla leaned against him. "But I don't regret it. Any of it. Even the cold, even the fear, because it led here, to this." She gestured at the thriving garden, the laughing children, the warm sun overhead. "To a kingdom that's alive instead of frozen, to a mate who sees me as essential instead of expendable, to a life I actually want to live." Kael pressed a kiss to her temple. "You know what the irony is? Your pack thought they were sacrificing their most expendable member. Instead, they gave me the most essential person in my life, the one who saved my kingdom, who taught me to feel again, who gave me a future I thought was impossible. Their loss, my gain." "Our gain," Kael corrected. "This kingdom's gain. Every person who lives in warmth instead of cold should thank you." "They do. Every harvest festival, every summer celebration, every time someone plants flowers." Nyla smiled. "But I don't need thanks. I have something better." "What's that?" "Proof that I was right, that I wasn't expendable, that surviving out of spite was the best decision I ever made." She looked up at him, her eyes sparkling. "And the satisfaction of knowing that Alpha Brennan is currently watching my brother rule the pack better than he ever did, while I rule a kingdom he tried to sacrifice me to." Kael laughed. "You're still holding that grudge?" "Always. Spite doesn't expire, Ice King." "Good thing I find your spite incredibly attractive." Their daughter finally came running over, demanding attention. Their son woke up fussing. And in the chaos of parenthood and running a kingdom, Nyla caught Kael's eye and saw the same wonder she felt. They'd both been alone, both frozen in their own ways. Him by a curse, her by a pack that saw her as worthless, both convinced they'd never find warmth or connection or love. And then a desperate Omega had walked into a frozen castle, too stubborn to die, and melted a curse that should have been unbreakable. Sometimes the greatest love stories started with sacrifice, with walking willingly toward death because the alternative was worse, with choosing spite and stubbornness over fear. And sometimes those stories ended not in frozen castles or early graves, but in gardens full of flowers, with children laughing in the sun, and a love that burned warm enough to thaw even the coldest heart. Years later, when travelers passed through the North and asked about the queen who broke the Ice King's curse, the elders would smile and say, "She was sent here to die. They called her expendable. But she was too stubborn to freeze, too brave to give up, and too essential to be forgotten." And then they'd add, "Never underestimate someone your enemy considers worthless. They might just save a kingdom and steal a king's heart while proving everyone wrong." The children would look up at the portrait in the great hall, King Kael and Queen Nyla surrounded by flowers in a garden that once couldn't grow, their hands clasped and their expressions full of warmth that no curse could touch. And they'd understand. Being sent to die wasn't the end of Nyla's story. It was the beginning of a thaw, a transformation. A love that proved warmth was stronger than ice, spite was stronger than fear, and sometimes the most extraordinary things happened to people everyone else called ordinary. Nyla Ashwood wasn't sent to the Ice King as sacrifice. She was sent as salvation, his, the kingdom's, and her own, and that made all the difference. If this story reminded you that your worth isn't defined by those who overlook you, subscribe to Alpha Moon Tales. Because every story here is about people who were underestimated, dismissed, or sent to fail, and who proved everyone spectacularly wrong. Your moment is coming. Your warmth will melt the coldest doubts. Subscribe and join our pack, where every wolf is valued, seen, and celebrated. Thank you for being here, beautiful family. Until next time, remember, sometimes the greatest transformations happen in the coldest places, and the strongest hearts are the ones that refuse to freeze.